Another day, another Kill Team hype article on Warhammer Community, another Tabletop Impulse video. So this time we're going through all the rules spoilers we've just been given for the new Vespid Stingwings Kill Team. And there's some little bits of core rules information as well, peppered throughout the article. And I think, right, that the Vespid Stingwings sound pretty powerful. So, the first bit we're going to focus on is the fact that they can all fly. I'm going to read you this little extract from the article. The Vespid Stingwings are one of the most manoeuvrable kill teams to date, and their natural ability to fly above the kill zone is the core of a diverse suite of rules. This ability is a great indicator of the clearer, more concise rules found in the new edition, as rather than acting like a normal move with line after line of exceptions to terrain height control zones and the like, flying now requires you to simply pick up the operative and put them back down somewhere within their movement range. Nothing more. Unless you're fighting aboard Killzone Gallowdark, even Vespid find it difficult to burrow through the enclosed ceilings. This gives Vespid operatives unparalleled agility in and around terrain, as they don't need to worry about intervening walls and whether or not they can find a climbing surface. A climbing surface. Interesting. And they can also neatly avoid traps set up to snare less nimble teams. Flying does adhere to most other game rules though, so you still need to charge to get into control range. So a couple of things there. First, they've got team-wide fly. And a lot of people thought that because they told us they were going to fly, but a lot of people thought this would be like a toned down fly or a less good fly, because the last team we had with team-wide fly, the Harlequins, they had their team-wide fly taken away. It was deemed too powerful. So, will Harlequins have fly restored? I mean, we know Harlequins are getting a rule set, right? They might be going away to Legends or something. We don't know about that, but they're definitely going to get some rules. Might they have fly restored? Otherwise, Vespid could be the only full flying team. If fly was a massive problem for Harlequins in the last edition of Kill Team, why is it back for Vespid? Well, I mean, they do look like a mostly shooty team, whereas Harlequins was a combat team. It does look like you can't use a fly move to get into close combat as well now, which is, I guess, a change. And yeah, maybe they don't have quite the survivability tricks that Harlequins had as well. So I think it could be, obviously it's going to be very powerful, but I think it could be really balanced. It's just interesting to see that they took fly away from one team that all had fly, and now they've come up with another team that all have fly. A little bit in the text there about finding a climbing surface is interesting. Presumably you're going to have to actually have a piece of terrain that you're climbing up, be able to point to it and say, this is the piece of terrain that I'm climbing up, and that's why you might want to bring one of those neat little ladders to let you climb up the front of a ruin. Hopefully, I don't think... It could be that they're going to designate like particular areas on the terrain as climbing surfaces, and that you can't just climb up like a random wall with a window in. That'd be weird, but interesting. Interesting, right? That would give Vespid a real clear advantage if they make climbing up things more difficult for other factions. Interesting. Let's look at the Neutron Charge. So again, I'll read a little bit from the summary here. Vespid don't just use their wings for traversal either, as the harmonics projected by their fluttering induce a strange resonance within their weapons' neutron crystals, giving them the armor-piercing punch they're rightly feared for. In Kill Team, this manifests as the powerful Piercing 1 rule, the new name for the old AP weapon ability, so long as the operative has moved or used fly in the same turning point, providing commanders with a tough choice between spending their action points on movement and thus powering up their guns, or taking other mission actions. So this sounds really cool. We've learned that AP is the new name for piercing, which makes sense, and then we've got a proper look at the actual Neutron Charge rule from the book, so let's read that. Neutron Charge. Neutron weapons are powered by radioactive crystals from the Vespid's home world. The harmonic thrumming of Vespid's wings resonates within the crystals to charge them. When unleashed, even heavy combat armor can barely protect against this atom-stripping energy charge. Neutron weapons are any weapons that have the word neutron in their name, e.g. neutron blaster, neutron grenade launcher, etc. Whenever a friendly Vespid Stingwing operative moves or uses fly, its neutron weapons have the piercing 1 weapon rule until the end of the turning point. So this is effectively the AP, what we would have called AP1, so that you're going to be rolling 1 less defense dice all the time, not on a crit, right? And yeah, that's pretty powerful. But it does require the Vespid player to move with the Vespid. Now, there's nothing here that specifies a limitation in terms of a minimum distance. And there was nothing from yesterday's article about the reposition action that specified a minimum distance either. So it seems quite possible that you don't actually have to physically move the Vespid, or maybe you move the Vespid like 1 mil, like a tiny little, you touch the model and nudge it ever so slightly and it has moved, and then you get your extra point of AP, which is a little bit weird, but what it does mean is that you're effectively spending 2 AP to shoot the gun with the extra point of piercing. So, like, as a trade-off, the trade-off is still there. You've spent the AP to do the move action. I wouldn't get too bent out of shape about whether you actually have to physically move or not, and if not, how far. Like, it does have a bit of ludo-narrative dissonance there, so, you know, in the storyline, it's the Vespid does the big long fly, and it flaps its wings, and this charges the weapon, and so if you were trying to write it to be more kind of in line with the narrative, you might say, look, if you fly forwards like at least 4 inches, then your guns get better. But they've not gone that route, seemingly. They've just gone, well, if you've done the move action, you've spent the AP, so you're looking at it mechanically as an AP, you know, almost like an AP tax if you didn't want to move to power up your gun. On the other hand, right, if you were going to move and shoot anyway, which is quite a common turn in Kill Team, right, I move and I shoot, then it's gravy, right? It's a free bonus for moving and shooting. So that's pretty cool. Really powerful. And this is on their basic troopers, basic like bolter-style weapons. Remember, we're not talking about a special weapon. And that's pretty cool. That's pretty rad. And what's about a little bit that was only in the little video? The little video for this article was much less useful than the video on the previous Warcom Kill Team article. This one was one of their kind of fluff, background-styled videos, but there was one little hint on it that wasn't repeating something that was already in the article. There were just these 3 lines in the video, which took the style of an Imperial briefing, right, about the Vespid, right, in universe, and it said, the Swarm Guard operatives are particularly dangerous. They unleash deadly flame weapons from the skies, and not even cover will protect your kill team. So, little bit of interest here. Is this hinting at a global buff to Flamers? It could be, right? It could be that Flamers gain something like no cover, which would be alright. Fine, yeah. It could be that it's something people have been wishlisting for a long time, that Flamers gain indirect, which, you know, dare we to dream, a lot of people have said Flamers should have indirect, right, over and over the course of the edition. Let me know in the comments, if Flamers gained indirect, would you take a Flamer over a grenade launcher, a melter gun, a plasma gun? Like, you know, does that make it a thing? Let me know. Now, this could be hinting at this. Obviously, first of all, it's worth saying that for Vespid, we're supposed to be doing a video about Vespid. The Vespid, we've seen nothing to say that the Vespid have any choices in team building whatsoever. Right? It seems like all of their things are fixed, and they may even have to take some Billy Basic Warriors. And this could be a special rule that's limited to the Swarm Guard's special Tau Flamer, in much the same way that the Sisters Novitiates Flamers have their special rule about setting people on fire, and that didn't become part of the general rules of Kill Team either. But I just wanted to put this in there because it could be hinting, like, they need to do something to Flamers. For all those kind of Imperial-style teams where it's like, well, you can take a Flamer, you can take a Sniper Rifle, you can take a Melter Gun, you can take a Plasma Gun, and there's no points. So I do think they need to rebalance that sort of quartet of weapons. Quintet, isn't it? Because the grenade launcher as well. For some teams, they really are like weighing up between the grenade launcher, the Sniper Rifle, the Flamer, the Melter Gun, and the Plasma Gun, and then for other teams, the Sniper Rifle is separated out, or they don't have access to the grenade launcher. But like all those 5 things should be on a par with each other, and there shouldn't be an obvious choice. And obviously, at the moment, the Flamer is like There's a really good Turning Point Tactics video on exactly why you should never take a flamer under any circumstances. So, hopefully this is the sign of a general buff to flamers that will be cool. So we're going to talk about Communion. So Communion is the Vespid Stingwings special rule, like their team-wide special rule that we know about. And there's a lot of text on here, so I'm going to read through it for you. Communion, alas, despite their self-sufficiency and can-do attitude in battle, Stingwing teams struggle to communicate naturally with their Tau handlers, and rely on the Strain Leader's high-tech Communion helm to bridge the strategic gap. Without direction from a level-headed liaison, Vespid can revert to their aggressive and warlike ways, and the fast-paced nature of missions means even the best commanders struggle to rein them all in at once. To represent this constant effort to keep the Vespid focused and on task, Communion points must be allocated to direct the operative's attention towards mission objectives and less immediate targets. As a teacher, I suddenly have a lot of sympathy with the Tau handler there, keeping all of their guys focused and on task is a constant. Yeah, next time I'm having a poor lesson at work, I'm going to say to anyone that comes in, I'm running low on Communion points, which anyway, Communion points are used to maintain the tactical focus of friendly Vespid Stingwing operatives. In the ready step of each strategy phase, remove all Communion points from the previous turning point. Then you gain D3 Communion points, +1 if a friendly oversight drone operative is in the kill zone. Communion points are used as follows: oversight drone operatives unaffected by the following. Number 1. Whenever a friendly Vespid Stingwing operative is performing the shoot action, it can only target the closest enemy operative within 8 of it. Within 8. We're going to be using tape measures. We're not going to use the fun new measuring widgets because it's going to say, are you within 8 inches of a thing? Now, happily, I still have my Kill Team branded tape measure from Kill Team 2018, right? So I'm not going to be there with like some... Because Games Workshop have stopped making tape measures. So you're going to have to get down to like B&Q or Homebase or whatever it is in America, Lowe's, I want to say, and buy a tape measure, right? Because if they're going to ask for 8-inch measurements, and you've only got a 6-inch stick, we're going to have to go back to tape measures. Anyway, closest enemy operative within 8 of it, excluding enemy operatives within control range of their other friendly Vespid Stingwing operatives, unless you spend 1 of your Communion points. So, to break that down, because it was a little bit confusing there with the parentheses and my rant about tape measures, you have to shoot your closest guy, the closest enemy. You can ignore enemies that are in combat with another. So if you've got a target that's within 8, but there's other things that are closer, but your other Vespid are in combat with those things, you can ignore the things the other Vespid are in combat with, right? Unless you spend 1 of your Communion points. For weapons with the blast, the torrent weapon rule, the first target must be selected in this way. So that's interesting. Side point, by the way, they've turned engagement range into control range. So Oro on the Discord was saying, and the more I read control range, the more I think this. Is it going to be the case that your objectives are going to be a 40mm token, and then you're going to have the control range of 1 inch to be within the 40mm token, which means that you're going to be, right, makers of weird little circles can rejoice, because it means the circles are going to be if this is the case, and I'm speculating, it means that your circles are going to be a slightly different diameter, right? Because it's going to be previously objectives were a point with no dimensions, like the head of a pin, with 2 inches to control it. If they go to being a 40mm marker with 1 inch to control it, that means that the distance from the point in the centre of the objective, the radius, if you want to go and use a big circle to mark out your objectives, the radius would have to be 1 inch plus 2 centimetres. Right, so it would be half a centimetre. So your objective range would be half a centimetre smaller. Now, I don't know if that's going to come to pass, right? But it's just I keep reading this term control control, not combat, not engagement. So is it also going to be the thing for controlling markers? It's interesting, isn't it? Stick a pin in that. Anyway, back to Vespid. We're talking about Vespid. I totally lost my own fault there. I totally lost my own. Yes. So that's shooting. For combat, so point 2, whenever a friendly Vespid Stingwing operative performs the charge action, it must finish the action within control range of the closest enemy operative. It can, unless you spend a communion point. So, again, unless you spend one of your points, you have to charge the closest guy. I should say, we're assuming that control range is 1. It could be 2, which would be interesting and totally change the game, but cool. Point 3. Whenever you perform the pickup marker or a mission action with a friendly Vespid Stingwing, you must also spend one of your communion points to do so. Right? And number 4, whenever a friendly Vespid Stingwing operative is shooting, you can spend one and only one of your communion points to re-roll 1 attack dice, which is actually a positive thing. So, I don't like this rule, because I think it's poor design space to have your special rule that takes a lot of tracking and accounting, you know, and we're familiar with these in Kill Team, whether you're playing Night Lords or Sisters of Battle or Kazakin or Harlequins. There's loads of different teams out there that have some kind of extra thing they have to track and keep track of. But I think it's poor design space to have that be something that you have to track that doesn't have a positive payoff for you as the person playing the team. Right? Because you have to do some extra bookkeeping, which is a little bit tedious, and then you're not spending your points to do something that makes you, I've got some of these points, I can do this. You're having to deduct points when you do stuff that you would ordinarily do. And I just think that's a bit like... It just... For me, that ends up being a little bit of a feels bad. Am I the only person... I'm not saying, because the team, I said on the thumbnail, the team looks really good, and I think, like, actually, this is probably, when we look at all the other things that they're going to have in the round, I think they're going to be a balanced, if not slightly over par team, right? I'm not saying that this makes them a bad team, I'm just saying that this might make them feel a little tiny bit miserable to play. Does anybody else get what I'm trying to say? Like, you're having to do a whole load of bookkeeping for a thing that is a debuff for your team. Let me know in the comments what you think about that, right? It's just very psychological. I'm making a psychological point, right? Not a game balance point, but you've got to remember that, is this good? Is this powerful? Is this balanced? Is not the only way to evaluate rules. Am I having fun when I apply the rules is arguably a more important thing to think about, right? And on the same vein, I don't like the dice roll being D3. Because, as somebody who's been playing a lot of Night Lords recently, which have a thing where you roll a D3 for their prescience points, like it feels bad when you roll 1 and then in turn 2 you also roll 1, and it's like, well, I'm not really getting to use this mechanic now. Like, I don't know. I would rather it was 2. I just really would. Every time they have a thing like this, I'd rather it just gave you 2 points. And I know that people like the idea of highs and lows over the course of a game, but you can just have a game where every turning point's a low, a low, a low, and a low, and a low. And it's like, well, that's just one game. But if it's one game in a tournament, and you lose that one game because you just couldn't get enough communion points, that's going to feel quite poor. I don't know. Unless they have some more rules that we haven't seen, Vespid are really, 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 really going to suck on Into the Dark. Like, they're going to be really... It's going to be agonising if you have to play on Into the Dark. Because, A, you've lost Fly, right? So, if you assume that Games Workshop's design team is good at its job, Fly, team-wide Fly is a really powerful ability. So, to have that taken away, and you're not getting anything back instead of it, that's going to be a negative. Unless they've changed it, opening a door is a mission action, so you have to spend a communion point to open doors, right? So that means that you could potentially be sitting there in turn 1 on Into the Dark. If you roll a 1 or a 2 on your D3, and your little drone's going to be alive, so you're going to have 2 communion points. So if you need to interact with objectives, if you need to do a loot or a pickup or whatever, or a capture, you can't say you've got a home objective to capture and then you open a door, and usually you'd be hoping to get 2 on the primary. Like, if it's anything like, and I am applying old Kill Team, and I realise it's a totally different game, but it just feels like that might really suck as a thing where you just can't, because you've got to spend. Now they may change it. The Kill Team people are very clever, right? And the playtesters are very clever. The lead designer is very clever. There's a lot of very clever people, so they probably thought about this. But what worries me a little bit, because Games Workshop do have a little bit of form in this regard, I'm going to go on a limb and I'm going to say that 90% of the playtesting, I'm talking on my ass, I know nothing, right? But I'm going to speculate that 90% of the playtesting will have taken place on the new Killzone Vertigus, or things that approximate that, right? And maybe they've maybe done comparatively less on Into the Dark. Now you can say, well, it's balanced in the round, right? Because they'll suck on Into the Dark, but they will take names in better Desma. Sure, yeah. That's only going to make a difference if people actually play better Desma. Like, Warhammer World didn't even use better Desma at their last weekend Golden Ticket event, but they used Into the Dark for 50% of the games. So that's a social thing that comes in there. And it has to be said, not everybody is a tournament gamer. So do you care if it's balanced in the over the course of the tournament, or do you want every episode of a game of Kill Team in whatever Killzone to feel really fun? And we've had all these conversations before when we talked about Into the Dark and Better Desma and all these things, but that just gives me a little bit of pause. I hate to be negative, because overall I think they look really fun and cool, but that whole thing where you just think about how much they might kind of suck on Into the Dark, hopefully they've thought of it, squared it away, and opening a door, that'll go a long way. They just say that opening a door Into the Dark isn't classed as a mission action, and so it isn't covered by communion, and so you don't need to spend a communion point to open a door. Solves 75% of the problem I'm having. Presumably they've done that, and it's going to be A-okay, but we just don't quite know. I do like, right, it's kind of nice that you can use them to re-roll if you end up with spares, and I can see how you could end up with spares, potentially, if you're rolling hot, if you're playing on open board, if you're playing a primary where there's no mission actions to do, and your secondary or secondaries that you've taken don't require you to do any mission actions, and you're playing against another team where you're playing against Felgor, so you've got loads of targets to shoot and fight that happen to be close to you, and you don't really mind. You could end up with lots of spare points, and it's nice that you can then use those in place of command points. Presumably, we're still having command points. Presumably, right? In place of command points to get your rerolls. That's pretty cool. I just don't like how this team on certain matchups, on certain kill zones, and with a good dice roll for its communion points, could be bananas, and then against other teams on other kill zones with bad rolls for its communion points, could really be suffering. That's how it looks to me. Tell me, please, people who are actually really good at Kill Team, because I am distinctly mid. Right? I'm not going to say I'm crap anymore, because I did quite well at the tournament. I'm distinctly mid. People who are actually really good, could you tell me why I'm wrong and why these are really, really fun in the comments? That would be really helpful. We're going to look at Devastating. So this is another little tidbit. So this is, I'll just read it, right? The combination of flexible movements and command limitations make the Vespid a satisfyingly tactical team that rewards strategic decision-making and positioning with the chance to unleash deadly firepower. Even their most basic warriors carry a gun with a devastating 2 rule, which inflicts extra guaranteed damage whenever a critical hit is retained, and some specialist weapons like the Neuron Rail Rifle and Neutron Grenade Launcher can debilitate their targets with constant damage turn after turn. So it sounds a lot like Devastating is the new name for Mortal Wounds, right? And so you're going to have effectively mortal wounds 2 on all your basic guns. And again, that's really good, and it's going to offset a lot of the negatives that we've been talking about. They really are a team of extremes. But yeah, really, all I'm really pointing out here is that there's that they're going to have it, and also that we're now. It looks like we're now talking about devastating, where previously we were talking about mortal wounds. There's going to be a bit of a terminology update needs to go on among those of us who like to talk about the game of Kill Team. We're going to look at data cards. They showed us a data card, so we can see the Vespid Skyblast here is so this is a grenade launcher fellow, right? They didn't show us a basic warrior. They showed us a grenade launcher guy. That's cool. APL 2, move 6, standard, 5 up save, yeah, pretty poor, but 9 wounds, which is actually more. I expected these to be a 10-man team with 8 wounds. So if they're a 10-man team or 10 creature team with 9 wounds, that's more resilient than I thought they were going to be. Now, it could be that they're not a 10-man team. You get 10 models in the box, but you only get to use 6, 7, 8, right, of them. That's potentially true as well. But yeah, I was quite surprised to see 9 wounds. That's pretty cool, okay? Especially when they said on the stream the other day that the Vespid were a glass cannon. I wondered if they were even going to have as few as 7 wounds, because they chose to. I was thinking, alright, they're going to be a 5 up save, like 7 or 8 wound team. 9 wounds doesn't strike me as glass cannon-y, but yeah, it's what they were gone for. But it does depend on how many operatives they get, right? So we got that neutron grenade launcher, so hitting on 4s, so we call them as having a ballistic skill, right? It's not called BS anymore, it's called hit, but we'll call them having a ballistic skill of 4, right? 3 and 3, which is interesting, but you've got that devastating 2. Now, it doesn't have a column anymore for critical rules, like it used to, but we know from the previous thing we read that devastating is mortal wounds on it. It's 2 guaranteed wounds on a crit. Right, so you can read that as MW2 in the crit column. They just haven't separated out the rules that in the previous version of Kill Team, the cards separated out the rules that only applied on a crit versus the rules that don't only apply on a crit. Now you just have to know which of these are critical rules and which aren't. Okay, so assuming the core rulebook it says devastating 2 is 2 extra devastating X, it will probably say, is X extra wounds are automatically applied when you retain a crit, I imagine, right? Blast 2 inches, which we assume works the same as ever, right? Yeah. And then this neutron bombardment rule. So, neutron bombardment to place one of your neutron fallout markers within the primary target's control range, which we're assuming is an inch. Once during each enemy operative's activation, as soon as it's within 2 of one of your neutron fallout markers, inflict D3 damage. Once during an enemy operative's activation. So, that could be at the start of their activation, the end of their activation, in the middle of their activation. Like, so the Vespid player is going to have to be like, no, watching like a hawk and going, no, because you move near that, like you take your D3 damage. That's pretty cool. But it only happens once, so multiple markers are not cumulative. That seems like a pretty cool rule. You're going to need lots of little tokens, I guess, to stick around your opponent's because I presume you can lay down a different one each turn, and you can lay down a different one with Overwatch, so you potentially get quite a few of these out, right, which is pretty cool. Yeah, seems strong. And we also learn, remember, in that bottom right-hand corner, that the Vespid are on a 28mm base. I know that there are some people on my Discord who have been saying that the Vespid look pretty similar to the Geonosians from Star Wars. So look that up if you're that way inclined. And people saying, I'm just going to... I don't know if these were being serious or they were just making the remark about GW maybe being inspired by something else, saying, I'm going to use Star Wars Legion Geonosians. Well, if you wanted to get working on that, you know who you are. 28mm bases. Off you go. Right. Let's have a little look at the next page. So, equipment. We got a bit of preamble about equipment here as well. So, with their damage output already well catered for, the Stingwings faction equipment is geared more towards improving their abilities. On that subject, in the new edition of Kill Team, equipment is no longer purchased with the stock of equipment points that players need to keep track of, and instead you'll simply select 4 different items from those available to your faction. So, I'm going to pause there for a minute. We knew from the previous video that you could choose 4 equipment, but it wasn't certain where that was across both of your equipment pools or just from the... Remember, we've got the universal equipment. That's the plastic stuff that we've seen. The light barricades, the heavy barricades, the barbed wire, the grenades, the mantlet, the minefield, all those things, the radio. It now sounds to me like it's 4 picks from the pool of your faction equipment and the universal equipment, which worries me a little bit, because I would assume, generally speaking, the faction equipment is going to be better because it's going to be tied in with what your kill team is designed to do. Now remember that it could still be 4 from each, so 4 universal plus 4 faction, right? Now remember that you can have an extra equipment from your scouting. One of the scouting options was an extra piece of equipment, so that's potentially 5 equipment items, which I think is looking to be a powerful option, right? But it sounds like picking equipment's going to be quite tight, because it sounds like all the equipment's going to be pretty good, right? So let's look at the next part of the thing. Vespid make use of several stimulants dispersed from their armour, but Games Workshop, the Vespid are naked. So do they... Anyway. Dispersed from their armour to sharpen their senses. Supercharge their wing beats and induce terrifying battle rage. With communion points in such short supply, yes, the convergence stimulant's ability to pick up a mission marker without spending one can mean the difference between victory and failure. And to make sure you get as many points as possible, a quick pump of neurostimulant won't go amiss. So let's look at these. We've got convergence stimulant. This substance, dispensed only in extreme cases and at the Sashway's discretion, suppresses the instinctual responses of Vespids to aid in mission focus under extreme stress. So, once per turning point, a friendly Vespid Stingwing operative can perform the pickup marker or a mission action without spending a communion point. Sounds really powerful, right? Sounds like an absolute must on Into the Dark if you need to open doors as a mission action, right? Neurostimulant, dispensed from ampules within the Vespid's armour. The Vespid don't wear armour, Games Workshop. They're naked, like the stealth one does, but they're naked wasp. Anyway, within the Vespid's armour, this chemical cocktail is intended to aid in the clarity of communication and ensure discipline is maintained during battle. Now, in the ready step of each strategy phase, when determining how many communion points to gain, you can roll 2d3 and select the d3 that you want to use. They both seem really very good, right? Like, they both seem like things that you really want to mitigate against a lot of those things I was complaining about before, about you'll see like potentially, like especially that rolling 2 dice thing. I find it hard to believe I wouldn't want that in every single game, just to mitigate against that really, really bad scenario where you just roll a 1 and then another 1 and then another 1. Like, it's going to make the team so much more reliable. The convergence stimulant, like, you're going to have to look at the map and the mission and be like, how many mission actions am I going to have to do? It might come in absolutely clutch. It might on some maps and some missions and some selections of TAC Ops not be required, because we can play, at least in the current edition of Kill Team, we can play without needing to do any mission actions. Like, you can be playing on Secure, right? Is that it? Or Capture? I always mix up the names. But whichever one it is, where you just need to step on the objective at the end of the turn, on an open board, and you don't, and then you've taken like Seek and Destroy, and you don't need to do any mission actions. So that's going to depend on what exactly your makeup of point scoring is. But that neurostimulant seems absolutely like mandatory to me. So yeah, I think, like I said, I think equipment is going to be a really hard and interesting choice for Kill Team 2024, and that really does beg a question. What's going to happen with all the existing teams, right, from Orc Commandos down to Harkin Jaegers, like they said, all those teams that are getting fully supported? They're going to have to rewrite the equipment lists. right? Like, they're going to have to get rid of, like, crack grenades and smoke grenades and all those things that are in the universal equipment list. That's fine. But also, like, I've been playing a lot of Night Lords recently, and you've got... I usually take some 2-point equipment, some 3-point equipment, and then 1 point on the little knife. Like, well, if I'm only getting 4 picks, I'm never taking a stupid little knife for my melter gun, and that's just not going to happen. So they're going to need to... Will they end up with equipment lists that are just taking up 50% with absolute rubbish that you'd never take? Like, and then that could become one of the big divides. Games Workshop always does this, to try and entice you to buy the new stuff, right? It could become one of the big divides, like, oh, well, but the second edition teams, they all have really powerful equipment lists, and some of the first edition teams, like, you're always on the universal equipment, because nothing in your faction equipment list really competes with the utility of the universal equipment. Could prove to be the case, right? We'll have to see. Okay, but gone are the days of there are teams out there currently now, I can think of a couple off the top of my head, where people are tending to go, oh, they've all got climbing ropes, or oh, they've all got meat, or oh, they've all got stims, they've got 10 1-point things. Well, those builds will no longer work. So it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out when they redo the equipment list, and that could be a little bit of a slight tension between the pre-existing teams and the brand new ones. We'll have to see. What's next? So this last little bit at the end of the article gives us a clue of what the next week of content on Warhammer Community, and hence the next week of content on my channel, is going to look like, right? So it says here, with their speed and flight, the Vespid Stingwings can dominate a chaotic kill zone like those represented by Kill Team Hivestorm's missions, which we'll be taking a look at soon. Okay. Until then, take a break with some short fiction tomorrow as the Tempestus Aquilons finally meet their Xenos foes in battle, and join us again next week to find out what humanity's own drop troops do. So it sounds like tomorrow's article is going to be fluff, so probably I don't need to make a video, which is relaxing. It sounds like we're not going to get any Kill Team stuff over the weekends. And then it sounds like we're going to get at least 2 articles next week. One will be about one will be this article, but for the new Tempestus Aquilons, and one's going to be looking at the missions. Now, does that mean the narrative missions? It does say Kill Team Hivestorm's missions, so presumably that's the narrative missions in Hivestorm and not the approved ops missions, right? But it'll be interesting to look at anyway, potentially. So, I'm going to be making lots of extra videos while this hype period is going. Obviously, I made a video today, a video yesterday, and a video the day before. I'm not necessarily going to make a video every day, because some fiction. So does that mean maybe there won't be a video at the weekend? Potentially, like, we'll just see how that goes and what I feel like, and whether there's anything else I want to talk about. But I hope you've been appreciating this, like, accelerated amount of content. I've enjoyed doing it. Of course, in September, when I have to go back to work, I might not be able to get the video out as quickly during the middle of the day, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, right? Or we'll fly over it with our Vespid Stingwings. What did you think of the article? I've linked it down below if you want to read it for yourself, right? Let me know what you thought. Did I miss anything that signals to you, like, oh, this is clearly going to be an important rules change? Did I interpret anything differently to the way you've interpreted it? Like, let me know. I'm just a guy, so let me know. Like I said, I'm a little worried now that the older kill teams are going to have weird equipment lists that don't quite match up to this new equipment paradigm, which is, I think, shaping up to be one of the biggest actual changes to the core game, like the equipment thing. So let me know what you think about that. If you've liked the video and you're not a subscriber, please consider subscribing. It doesn't cost you a penny, and it just boosts the visibility of the channel, and the closer we get to a huge number of subscribers, then the more chance we have of getting some, like, preview copies and things like that from Games Workshop, so that would be amazing. And if you are subscribed, just thank you so much. And then a double plus thank you so much to those people who are actually channel members, so that they actually pay a small amount of money every month to support me, which really is flabbergasting. It really is. And if you are a channel member, don't forget to vote in the Tell Mr. Tabletop Impulse What to Do painting contest. Details about that can be found in the pins, in the Discord, in the members only chat room. And if you're not a member, still join the Discord, because 99% of the rooms in the Discord are visible to you and free for you to use. Alright, thanks for listening, cheery bye, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.